Welcome back to the SG Weekly Talk Show. Guest this week, Chad Currie of CLC Landscaping out of Texas. Chad, what is going on, brother? Appreciate you joining us. I know you got hit with some traffic on the way in, but the show must go on. So we're back on to Facebook land here live. I'm not sure what could go wrong, but if it can, it probably will twice over the episode here. But
Yeah.
yeah, appreciate you coming on. If people haven't heard of you or seen you in the lawn care industry, I know we go way back in the SA ecosystem, but if you don't mind introducing yourself and just give us a little background of how you cut your teeth in the industry.
Yeah. Well, appreciate it, Mike. Thanks for having me, man. It's been, it's always been fun. It's been a fun ride getting to this point. And so, yeah. And also the flexibility. I know, traffic in Texas, it's everybody drives like, I always joke with my wife, she comes from a small town and there's like two stoplights. I come from the Houston area. And so it's like, if you want to get over, like you just use your blinker, but then just cut them off. Like, it's just one of those things. And I think there's a lot of that going on. So it takes a little longer to get around, but, no, man, thanks again for having me. So again, yeah, I'm Chad Currie. I own CLC Landscaping. We are primarily a design build construction company. We do maintenance. We have a goal the next by 2026 to be 50% design build or construction project work, 50% maintenance for recurring revenue. We're on track. We're actually doing a little bit better than we expected. But yeah, I mean, essentially, I'm just like any other landscaper and probably like many, about 95% of us got into it. Just, picked up a weed eater, started mowing. Well, when I picked up a weed eater, I tore some stuff up. My dad had to come fix it for me when I was, in eighth grade. Um, Speaking of that, I never got to mow my parents' lawn. My dad did his own. So that's kind of how I learned too. But it was always a little, lemonade stands. I got in trouble at school for selling candy. I had four guys that worked under me and I sold, I don't know, I was making like $1,000 a week. My mom worked at school, so it kind of cut me out of the big problems. But yeah, go to Sam's every Friday and sell some candy, and we cut a little commission. And yeah, it was, I guess, full entrepreneur, just the typical, just hungry. I like to make my own way, and it's kind of what's got me here. And so I always joke that if you want to know how to make something hard, call me. I've done a lot of it. I make things harder than they need to be. So being a part of mastermind groups and stuff like that, such as a Simple Growth Mastermind group, has really helped. Just kind of sometimes, I remember, Mike, I remember you coming back one time. I was trying to find these like 2 or 3 numbers that I wanted to look at, and I was like, Mike, I'm trying to figure this out, man. And you're like, why don't you just find that number? And I'm like, basically, it felt like a slap in the face that I needed. I was like, what was I trying to do? I spent an hour getting frustrated, couldn't figure it out. And you're just like, hey, look at this number. But that's why, having that group, is important. So um, how I got started, again, just door to door. The short story is I wanted to go to the fair. I was in 7th grade. A buddy of mine, down the street, he was mowing lawns and he needed some help, and I started mowing with him. And that same day, and we passed out some flyers. We ended up getting like 8 other lawns. We did like 15 that day, using his equipment, and he didn't want to keep those lawns. And so, it was never really an issue of money with my parents at that time, in terms of like, hey, it's more of the issue of they're going to say no. And I was like, well, I'm gonna go make my own money. So I got after it, and ended up not going to the fair that day, because we cut lawns all day. And then I was left with 10 to 12 new clients, and kind of just started from there. I was pulling a wagon with, my equipment just down the street. And, I got, so that was 7th, 8th grade, got to high school, kind of, up and down, just, sometimes want to run the business, sometimes don't, it's the drive. And senior year, I applied for a TCU entrepreneur. It's TCU college. I applied for an entrepreneur. It's the Entrepreneurship of the Year award. I don't think they have it now, but it's through the Neely School of Business. I didn't go to TCU, but anyways, I applied, and I was accepted to that 2-day event, recognized out of 900 students in Texas. As a young entrepreneur, there's 29 of us, and we got to essentially sell our business to high execs. So there was the CEO or president of Bank of America, president of ESPN was there. There was a couple big. So if you ever seen Big Belly Trash Can,
Yeah.
so that guy that started it right around then went to Neely School of Business. He spoke. And so we're sitting in this room of board execs and stuff. And I didn't know dude. I didn't know my numbers. I didn't know anything. My dad was like, if you won that, you would have looked like the biggest ass, just because I didn't know. I was like, yeah, we do $500,000. I was like, man, I might have been doing 150,000, which was still good, right? But young, and I just, anyways. But the whole cool thing is that the president of ESPN literally says, he goes, "Why don't you take this to college with you?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" Like, I didn't think of much of it. So that's, instead of stopping and just kind of getting rid of it, I moved everything up to Texas State University, following a girl. Not the same girl that I'm with now, not my wife, but that's what got me there. And about 6 weeks in, sorry, we did a lot of like flyers and stuff over the summer and stuff. And I got up there, and 6 weeks in, got everything stolen, everything. So it was, I mean, the entire trailer, probably $20,000 in equipment. And that, I got a Home Depot credit card for $500, my first credit card at the time. And just got some Ryobi equipment, which was god awful, but I did get a lawn boy. That was nice. And just got back after it. Right. And so, went through that a couple years, built it up. I was doing, I was going to school, or lack thereof. I always joke that, I spent about 70 grand touring Texas State. So it's about all I got. But, kind of did some other jobs. I was doing okay at that, but I remember going back to school full time and then working warehouse for about a year and a half. And I said, I cannot do this forever. Like, I just knew, like, I want to make my own way, and I wasn't going to work for somebody else. And so, I remember, I'll never forget the day I studied my butt off for a marketing test, and I got a 74 on it. And it just really, really pissed me off. I remember in the backyard, I was at our rental property. I called my dad. I was like, "Dad, I'm done with school. I'm done with this." Cause I knew what I had. I had a massive tax return from working in the warehouse and stuff. And luckily my grandmother, who's no longer here, but she was a saint. I mean, that lady, she's the reason why I got to this point, from a standpoint, co-signed on about, I don't know, 17 different things, for the first 3 or 4 years of business. But, so anyways, I told him, I said, "Man, I'm done. Like, I'm done with the school thing." And I knew the debt I was racking up. And so he said, "That's fine, as long as wherever you do right now and what you end up next year, you got to be doing better next year than what you are right now." So, fair enough. He said, "No, you need to go back to school." And a year later, we tripled revenue. We did from like 120 with me and like one or two other guys, maybe, to I think we hit just over like 380. We went to 700. Then we got to 1 million. Actually, that year we get to 988. So we didn't actually hit 1 million. But the next year we did 1.1. And then I learned at Jason Cupp's roundtable, which many of us in the industry know, that I was selling at a loss. I didn't know my numbers. But then on year 5, I hired my dad. So, this whole full circle, and he's been with me for 7 years now. And now we're fast forwarding, we have a goal of 3.1 million this year. We did 2.23 last year. It's a pretty hefty goal, but we feel like we're on track. We know our numbers and stuff. And so I know with the mastermind group and another mastermind group I'm in, and all the people I've met along the way. So like Mike, I remember, doing one of your live talks, or the video talks at the Dallas Aquarium after one of the Service Autopilot after party, and so if it wasn't for Service Autopilot, for me, I wouldn't have met any of these people, and I don't think I would have gotten there, just because I have that hunger and that drive, but like, it would have taken a lot longer. And so networking and being with people was huge for me. But
yeah, and that ecosystem was just huge. I mean, Service Autopilot, Jonathan Toshnik of Lawn Care Millionaire, co-founder of SA. Obviously, I think we're all indebted to him more than we'd like to admit. But yeah, he created that ecosystem, and obviously, same thing. Like, would not have gotten where we're at with any of my companies without Jonathan's guidance. So definitely, can't agree to more there. Digging back into CLC though, obviously right now the service offering, to my understanding, knowing you, is you've got maintenance, construction, and landscape design. Those are the 3 core areas. And you've got a pretty great team. You mentioned the masterminds there, and obviously there's some other groups out there you're involved with too, which I think are great complementary groups. But one of the things that always stands out to me, and I got a big shout out to Natalie if she's watching there in the office. You've got one hell of a team. In Natalie's case, a very sturdy team. But I guess the question there really is what was the catalyst that really got you to actually be able to build a team that really followed through the mission and vision that you've set? And what really was like the buy-in for these guys? Like, what size of team did you have? Because obviously in the early days while you're still in college, at least in my case, same thing, running the business through college with a couple crews. It was a business, but it wasn't necessarily a business. We definitely didn't
Right.
have a leadership team. But what did that kind of look like? What was that catalyst? When did that change that you've now got people that can run the day-to-day operations, and you can come on here and not worry about firefighting for an hour, or you can leave for a week and go on vacation?
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to put a nail in it, like an exact time, but it definitely was something that happened pretty quickly. And if I had to point it, it happened quickly with people, right? It wasn't so much like, okay, I just, some light bulbs, turned on in my head and I just figured it out. But I want to say, I mean, obviously a lot of frustration, really doing it a lot myself, and being the guy that everything fell back on. And I realized that, and I knew for a long time, I've always, again, from my, selling candy story, like I knew that I couldn't go to where I wanted without other people, right? I can't scale that. I can't build that. And so to me, I think being in the groups and seeing a lot of other people, and the teams, and again, going back to Jonathan Potoshnik, I remember sitting at an elite trip in, uh, where was it? We got stuck there with COVID. My wife and I. It was in Costa
It was
Rica.
Mexico, wasn't it? Or
It
Costa
was
Rica?
Costa Rica that me and my wife. Yeah, we got stuck there for 12 days. The only ones out of that group. But anyways, before that, we're sitting in the ocean, just hanging out. Me, Jonathan, and I don't know, about 10 other guys. And I asked him, I said, "Man, everybody asks you this, but what's the key? What's the deal?" He says, "It's your people." Everybody else agreed, right? And so we had started developing that leadership team at about that point, but it was really like when I hired my dad and I realized that, he's got a lot of experience, behind the scenes, and he came from the logistics trucking industry, but just from a standpoint of like analytics and logistics of like the construction side. Plus he's a very OCD, like I am, with how things are done from a physical standpoint, and the quality of work. But then my best friend, Andrew Mays, worked with Natalie for a long time, and I actually bowled with Natalie's husband, for we bowled on a team for, I don't know, 3 years. Me, my dad, and Andrew, and her husband. And I didn't really know Natalie a lot then, right? But I remember her. She worked at Nike for a long time. She was looking for a change, and I talked to my buddy Andrew, and he's like, "Dude, you need to call Natalie. Like, she'd be good for you." And I had met her a few times, and I reached out and I said, "Hey, Natalie, like like what does this think for you?" And we had a 2-hour conversation. I remember pacing around back and forth at like 8 p.m. in my master bedroom. My wife's like, "Are you going to get off the phone?" And so, and I told her, I was like, "Hey, look, I can't offer you what they're offering you. I can't, you're going to work harder than what you probably do. You're going to, all these things that should have said, don't come." And she did anyways. And now, like I think the buy-in really came from, she saw it as, so this is what she tells a lot of people, and that why she likes working with CLC is she feels that she's in a role that her decisions and her moves matter, right? So it's like a chess player. You actually make a move and it really impacts the people that you work with. And she works directly with these people. She's the glue. To me, she's like the team mom. She's the glue that keeps everybody together. Um, and that to me is invaluable. And she had the buy-in, seeing that, like my little brother, who's now one of our senior project crew leads. My dad is production manager, and so seeing it, the family kind of, dynamic in a way, I think she really got some buy-in there. And so she just saw that the drive is there amongst, and not just me, but for everybody, and saw that it's something completely different than retail. And I think that, she has the freedom to make choices, and I trust her to make those choices. So, that's why we call her my work wife, and that's how it's been. She's the one that it's like, I know if I bring her anywhere, it's like, well, I don't have to worry about talking, which is not a problem for me. But I also don't have to worry about making friends, because she's going to do all of it for me, And so, the first mastermind trip, I mean, I was like, all right, well, everybody loves Natalie. I don't need to come to these anymore. So, but yeah, I mean, from a leadership standpoint, that was where it's come. But, I wanted to touch on a point of that, is like, from a leadership point, like, that's kind of changed a little bit. My dad is still sitting on a leadership team, but he's not as much on a leadership role. And I think it's more of what we found is, it's not, I mean, he's older. It's not what he essentially like is passionate in terms of, he's passionate about the business and for our sake and for the business's sake. But I think it's one of those things where it's kind of like, he's really good at other things, and he's good at like 12 different things. And so it's like, we want to put him in charge of that. And so what we're doing is having him sit on that team, because he knows how we do things. But we realize that there's 3 people right now. We need more. There's going to be more people that are invested in the company, really mentally and personally, and someday, actually physically possibly. But it's one of those things where like we're looking to hire a production manager and somebody that is a true, leader, somebody that's going to essentially be a coach and really just build these people up. Right. That's been one of our big focuses on a hire. Um, but I think a lot of people, in my opinion, that I've found, and again, I could only tell you how to get to $2.5 million. That's where we're on track for 2.9 right now, but we're having some pretty big changes that'll get us to that 3.2 mark. But but my point is, I can only tell you how to get to there, right? I've never gotten to 10. I couldn't tell you how to do that. But what I can tell you is, I know that a lot of people, even half our size, from even a company standpoint, is maybe they force themselves to having a leadership team because it sounds cool. And there's something to be said about having the right people on that team. I forget the guy that wrote the book, but it's the right people in the right seats, and right people driving the bus. Um, that's what I've started to realize. Like, it's not about just having a team; it's having the right team. And some of that means there's tough decisions. Sometimes there's good decisions. And at the end of the day, like, my rule is like, and I tell the managers and stuff when they have conversations and having those card conversations, like, you have to ask yourself and ask the person you're talking to. Say, look, if I wasn't having this conversation with you, you should question me as your leader. Because if I'm not willing to have that conversation with you, who am I? Who am I to help get us there? So that's been a big one for me. But hopefully that kind of answers your question in terms of leadership.
Yeah, and I want to touch base on it because you hit. I want to unpack a couple things you hit, because I think that if you're watching this is really, really important. You talked about some things. I'll pick on Natalie, but myself included.
Yeah.
Like, when we're in that room, like when we're in that room, we're not the leader we need to be to go to the next level. So we're reinvesting in ourselves to actually gain those leadership skills. And I've seen that, at least in Natalie, her leadership skills and her abilities have definitely changed over the last 12 to 18 months, as well as yours and mine, just being in that room with the 8-figure business coaches that we bring in. But the thing that we talked about, Brandon Peterman and I hit on it last week or two on the SG Weekly as well, is unfortunately, as we continue to scale, we're going to hit a capacity level of people on our team. So what got us to 2 million may not get us to 4 to 5. And unfortunately, it's an ugly conversation, I guess, to have with ourselves as a leader. But once a year, we probably should be going through, in my opinion, and literally mentally firing everybody on the team. And if we knew what we knew now, based on the resume that we currently know, would we bring that back on for the next journey to where we're going? And unfortunately, they may be the best, weed whacker, best lawnmower, design build person, but maybe they're no longer the best person on the bus in the right seat that we're going, because they basically hit a capacity, and maybe they don't want to evolve as a person or a leader to help us get to that next level. Maybe it's just not within their capacity. So I think that's just an interesting exercise to go through. And Brandon and I talked about it quite a bit. So if you haven't seen the one with Brandon Peterman, go back and watch it if you're watching this, because Brandon put some really good perspective on it. But I think you're definitely touching on it. But I mean, as we're both trying to grow on our mission to get to 4 million here at Simple Growth, same exact thing. Like those folks that may get us to 3 may not get us to 4. Hopefully, if they're willing to evolve with us, we're going to get them the education, everything they need. But some folks just don't want to grow to that capacity. It's interesting you bring it up.
Yeah, and to that point, like, things move faster, right? The bigger you get, and that's something that I've learned too. And in reality, I'll start with myself. Like, there's things in my life that I want to continue to get better at, and something as simple as, like, having a more of a stringent morning routine. For me, that's always been a struggle, and having a team where nobody's there to wake you up, nobody's there to tell you, hey, you got to go get it today, right? You have to force yourself to do that. And overall, I don't do bad with it, but there's those days where you're just like, man, I just don't feel like doing it. Well, not everybody has that choice. And to me, I feel like employees, and I mean this in the best way possible, but employees have a shelf life, right? There is a time that some people, but if I raise my bar, well, ideally people can reach up to that bar. But if I'm here, I can't expect people to be here, right? I mean, that's just one of those things. I know we discussed it at one of the roundtable events we had with the mastermind group, and to me, it was very powerful, right? Because my team is only as good as the leader, in my opinion, right? It takes, and I don't have to be the best at everything, but I got to be the proven fact that, like, hey, I am the rock for everybody. I am the one that, and there's a lot of weight to that. But to me, things change, and you got to be willing to. And I think the best leaders in the world are the ones that can adapt, that can recognize that there's tough decisions to be made. And sometimes those are, if this was easy, we'd all be doing it. You know what I mean? And so I love it. I wouldn't change it for the world, but there are those, those tough conversations and those tough decisions, and that's been, it's, but that's what, to me, what the mastermind group is so important about. Like, I know we've done it in the Simple Growth in my other mastermind group that I'm a part of, which honestly, to me, those two groups, I'm not going to name the name just for the sake of conversation.
Well,
but it's like
Marty's group is good, man. I enjoy what Marty's doing. So I did, by all means.
Well, in that case,
mindset of abundance. We've got a couple folks that are in both groups, growing Simple Growth, and it's different. They're almost complementary.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. They really are, right? I don't get Simple Growth Mastermind with what I get in the ACE group. And I think that's a good thing, right? I could cross over, especially like I've included Natalie, that basically runs my office, pretty much runs the operation, everything internally at our office. I've included her from day one, and she goes to pretty much 95% of the mastermind events. And I think that's helpful too. So it's not just me bringing it back like, hey guys, we got to do this, make this big change. And they're like, dude, get out of here, man. I don't want to deal with this.
I think you hit it. And that's the key too. So it's not only just the business owner, but once the business owner kind of gets the foundational pieces of any of these groups, you got to start to get that leadership team buy-in and bring it back and help you execute it. That in my opinion, at least at Callahan's Lawn Care, that was the toughest part. And still, I had Paul and some of the other guys coming out to Phoenix, Arizona, and going through this elite methodology. I'd come back and be like this huge cheerleader, but then yeah, he's crazy. So I totally get it.
And it's easy to do. More. It's easy to do as the owner. Yeah, we come back and we're excited, and then they're like, dude, here he goes again. Just like everybody shut your door when he gets back, So yeah, trust me, I've gotten that look a few times. We call them idea meetings, or Chad's idea meetings, where, and I've learned, I have to respect their time. Like, hey, look, okay, just it's my way of coming up with the idea and the thinking, but that's not always beneficial to everybody around me. So
love it. So literally from slinging candy at the lunchroom table to
basically
going throrough college, maybe not totally get through with the lawn care company, and then obviously going into a multi-7-figure business here. One of the things we really like to wonder is, like, what are the metrics you're looking at, Chad, on a weekly basis, monthly basis, daily basis? What are the main KPIs, key performance indicators you're looking at to help guide you on that journey, your guardrails for success or things you need to work on?
Yeah, man. So, probably about 2 years ago, I didn't really know these numbers. I mean, I knew the numbers were there. I didn't really know what to look at. I'm like, I'm sitting there typing in Google, what's the right metric for a CEO? What do you need to look at? Like, everybody asks that question. And like, in reality, I realized, like, it's really what you need for your business. And you can kind of look at it from a standpoint of like, okay, what goals do I want to see my business achieve? And then you can kind of work back from there. But for me, so something that we've looked at a lot lately, because we've had some inefficiencies and we noticed that, like, our gross profit might be a little bit down. We really focus on, for me, it's the two big ones are where the boots meet the rubber meets the road, essentially, is estimated versus actual for time and materials. Materials and
budget versus actual. Yep. Okay.
Exactly. Yep. That is, to me, number one, because that's what makes money, right? I also started looking at man hours per revenue per man hour across the board. That's been pretty helpful. And then unbillable versus billable, which can be shown up in your gross profit, because what we've found is, like, I went and pulled a metric a couple weeks ago, and we realized that we were running at like 63% efficiency rating for that week for our lawn care guys. And that was god awful, right? I mean, I basically did the math, and I said, it's like, I might as well just write a check for $1,800 and just like go divvy it up against our clients, because that's basically what I'm doing, and so I explained
it. Been there.
It is 100%. And I think, but again, like I said earlier in the call, is like, I make things more difficult than they need to be. And I want to get off in the weeds and get down. And like, the idea is having a software that you use that you can dive in and understand is important, the aggregator, the data. But like, the whole intention behind it is, like, when this, essentially your fuel tank hits that little orange line, that's when you go and you can dive deeper into there. Now, heading up, like, hey, something's going wrong. We're heading in the wrong direction. But getting to that point, you have to pay attention, but you don't have to go dive deep until it really becomes ideally you want to know before it becomes a real problem, but not when you got a 3/4 of a tank, you're just like, hey, I'm going to dive in and try to figure out, like, why the specific client on this specific day at the specific property was a problem, right? That's not beneficial as a, maybe down the road you have somebody that in all they do is analytics, right? But to me, knowing that and knowing it really so actually one thing I told to really simplify that thought is one thing I told our new mowing manager, and he has a lot of experience in the industry. He's an old head, man. He's got, he's been multiple big name companies around here, Brightview Cleanscapes, which Cleanscapes is more down south. But and he came in and I was explaining, I said, look, we can agree that in reality, the team and people that are managing these don't actually have to know that exact number. They don't need to know these 12 or 15 different numbers in between. At the end of the day, if I were to give you a list and say, hey, look, all these need to be above this, and this final number needs to be here. You don't necessarily have to know everything. Ultimately, you want to, but you don't have to know everything that goes into that number immediately. Because what's nice and what's kind of cool, it's like the scoreboard at a football game or whatever, a hockey game, just because hockey playoffs, But it's one of those things like people naturally strive for that number no matter what. And so if you start to realize and that, hey, efficiency and quality, right? It's two things that are going to affect that number. And it's like anybody who plays Call of Duty, right? It's been a while since I have, but you start to look at your XP and your ranking and stuff like that. And that, well, shit, all I got to do is just do this a couple more times, or maybe I can double up and do a couple of things at the same time. And it's going to raise that number. They don't have to know all the details. And for me, it's like I want to explain those details. And sometimes that's over people's heads, and we're speaking at 100 miles an hour when in reality you only need to go 50. So from a number standpoint, Mike, I think that's a big one. It's revenue per man.
That's awesome. I love how you're coming in I love how you're coming to that 40,000 square foot view, almost like a stoplight example, like green, yellow, red. Obviously, if it's red or turning yellow to red, like if you need to dive in. So that totally makes sense. And I love the fact that you're kind of highlighting that, because as entrepreneurs, myself included, we like to look at a million different stats. We've gotten a lot better at that at Simple Growth. I will tell you, there was like 100 metrics. The team wanted to kill me.
I've seen your spreadsheets.
Yeah, they're brutal sometimes. But I guess diving into that, Chad. So as you're looking at this 40,000 square foot view, I'm assuming there's some kind of meeting rhythm or some kind of reporting rhythm. Now, is that you, the business owner, actually reporting out on these, or does that field manager or operations manager actually own those metrics and report them out? What does that look like at a cadence? Who's owning those metrics?
So in a perfect world, it would be, that person in charge of that department, right? We've had some struggles, and I won't go into deeply in terms of our operating software. We made some changes in which we're changing out of and going somewhere different. And we do feel, after a lot of heartache and struggle, we feel it's the right direction. But and we've got a pretty good partnership with them to actually help implement this process. But with that being said, it is one of those things that I feel that, like I was for a while, I'm the one that was looking at those numbers. And it was a lot of, I don't want to say emotion, but there's a lot of emotion behind the numbers because there wasn't true numbers, because they weren't being tracked. They were being tracked as good as they could with the tools we had. But I want to say the emotion, what I mean by that is essentially like, man, there's no money in the bank account, right? I got sick and tired of running a business that way. You can't run a business that way. And so we finally, we work with a guy named Jim Houston. He's big in the industry, the design build industry. And we've had him out 3 years in a row, building budgets, looking at break evens, and those type of really, knowing like exactly if I roll a crew with truck and trailer, 3-man crew, whatever, this is my break even. And I think our break even right now is $1,762 and like 38 cents, right? Rounded up, $1,762. But knowing that, you can make decisions, right? But from a standpoint of the reporting, we have those natural reports, and we have a dashboard that so we're really getting those every day in and day out. For me personally, I like to look at the global view, right? I want to look at what's our gross profit. I want to look at what's our cash flow like. I'm going to look at what our net profit is and what we're trending at. And I like to look at my debt service, because that's been a big one. That's something that I realized when I was at Jason Cupp's Roundtable a while back, that debt service was probably that and wrong pricing. Those are the 2 biggest reasons we were not making money. It wasn't even efficiency at that point, right?
Chad, you hit on it. So just to stop you for a second, because that was one of the Achilles heels of Callahan's as well in the early days, is that debt service can get you because it doesn't live on the P&L. It hangs out in that balance sheet that no one ever looks at. So that is something you definitely want to look at. And if you're accelerating your depreciation to avoid those taxes, eventually you're going to have to pay them. But those are things like, we want to definitely have a conversation with whether it's a Jason Cupp, a Jim Houston, or hopefully even your accountant. Like, we need to talk not just tax implications, but what does it look like for as an overhead recovery situation? Because most of the time the accountant just cares about GAAP, general accepted accounting principles, and how does that affect your tax liability, right? They're just trying to minimize that for you. But I think there's two different conversations that we're having, that tax professional conversation. But I'm glad you brought that up. And honestly, I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit. Part of the reason I wanted to have you on here, you really do have those numbers dialed in, and you're looking at those appropriately. And I can tell you, at least from my journey now with the third business going, hopefully to break 7 figures with Simple Estimate, it's an evolution. And as the business owner, you're probably going to own more of those metrics than you probably should, which I'm going to totally admit I am owning right now in Simple Estimate.
It's your baby.
But as we evolve, obviously, you want to get those leaders on the team to own them and done that. And I think we've done a really good job at Simple Growth with that, where I can come in on the Monday meeting and then go right down the line to the Virginia, Dylan, Andrea, and everybody just goes down that line. And if it's green, we're good. If it's yellow, the cool thing that I've seen, and it's come a lot from Dan Martell as well, but people are going to come to, and Ryan Dice as well is another guy I've been reading a lot with lately too. But that yellow area is they're coming, your leadership team will actually come with a plan, because I found nobody wants to show up to that call with a yellow or a red. But if it's yellow, it could be like, hey, it was a holiday weekend. We didn't run the cards on Friday or something, or Monday, because we weren't in the office. But here's the plan to to compensate that. So it's interesting. I think what you're saying totally makes sense. And I think obviously you're trying to be humble, but you really do own those numbers, and you're doing a great job. And the way it's evolving throughout the team that I've seen on the outside.
Yeah, I think that's every struggle
as I know
that every entrepreneur has. Or sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, it is. It totally is, right? Obviously, it's a struggle that we have. And, according to my kids, I take midday naps, fire people, and make YouTube videos like Mr. Beast. So, I mean, there's a lot on my plate right now outside of doing a couple of these interviews. So, I guess this would fulfill the Mr. Beast part, according to the kids.
Yeah, there you go.
But I know you've got a compressed schedule. Before we let you go, there's a couple, two more things I definitely want to kind of ask you, because right now, there's a stark difference in the labor market. We've got business owners saying it is impossible to find help. The labor market sucks. It's impossible. And it's the worst it's ever been. And then literally there's nobody in between. The other side of this is folks are like, it's the best labor market we've seen. And we got people at the door lining up. Neither are good or bad, but I'm curious, in your Texas market, in your perspective, what's your thought on the labor market?
Yeah. So, one thing I'll start with is the fact that, I do know probably over 100 green industry business owners, and all over the country, between these groups, and it I think it goes from area to area. However, from Texas and our standpoint, we've had more knocks on the door, right, that looking for jobs than we've had in the last 4 or 5 years. But it's been weird, right? It's getting those people to stick around, and it's getting that right person. Like, now we're starting to realize, like, okay, we have a Texas State University, which is 4 minutes from us, right? And so we figured, hey, we're going to tap into that market. We got 40,000 students. We want to tap into that market, and we actually offer part-time opportunities as well for these guys. And I don't mean this in a bad way, but like, at the end of the day, somebody who's trying to go to school and try to better themselves typically has a little bit of a more straight-lined head on their shoulders. And we know that, like, our turnovers in the industry is not the best, right? It's just a given, right? We have some good ones, and I think there's some better businesses better than others. But what we found is, these guys, even if they stick with us for 3 or 4 years, like while they're in college, or the people that don't finish. And I looked at a metric the other day that was like, I say the other day, this was a couple of years ago actually, but that it's more than half of students don't actually finish school. And obviously, if that's what their dream is, I want them to finish. But just like me, I didn't finish. So I'm sitting there thinking, okay, well, if we got 2 or 3 people, and then we keep them around because we're doing the right things and running the right business, man, we've got a guy that's not only has some education, has some background, kind of, and again, I don't look at college as education. I look at it as like proof. It's proof that you could show up. I could argue that with anybody. It is. Yeah, 100%. And I think, so having that, can get us a little bit further down the road. But from a labor market standpoint, I really think that to my argument again is, people say, "Oh, I can't find good guys." I'm like, well, you're not looking in the right place. You're not trying hard enough. Because there's companies out there that do. I mean, Amazon, yeah, they're hiring hundreds and hundreds of people every day, but they still found a way. And you look at, well, how can I compete with Amazon? Well, we're not running you like a robot, which I've heard they'd have a decent, work life or a decent work balance in the facilities. But, it's just, you get these things, and you have more of a personal approach. You have an ability to move up quicker and be a part of, everybody, with somewhere like a small business. And so I think for me, we do a lot every month. We do kind of a company gathering, something, we're doing what I've started doing. I haven't even shared this with the team yet, so this might be the first time to see it, but I added an automation that just, captures reviews, right? Like we had with Service Autopilot a while back and the simple growth stuff that y'all offer. But, we've captured 19 reviews in the last 2.5 weeks, right? I just a little text after the service, hey, how do we do? And, it says thumbs up, thumbs down. They click thumbs up, it goes straight to Google. Point being is for every one of those, it says, it's $100 for every review that goes towards our team plus family party. And the idea is I want to have their team involved too. You get more of that engagement from their significant others, kids, everything else. They know this is where daddy works. This is where mommy goes to work. And so I think that's important to me. But by doing that, we've also had a videographer and photographer coming in, and now we're actually documenting some of those. We just had our first company team photo, which was awesome. With equipment, the skidsters got the booms up in the air. It's something I've been wanting to do forever. But you got to ask yourself, why do we want to come work for CLC? And the thing I heard a long time, I can't coin this, it wasn't necessarily my saying, but I think it was one of the decals makers. Anyways, they said, if we focused as much on getting employees as we do getting new clients, we wouldn't have an employee problem. And there's something to be said about that. It's like, I know Tommy Mello talks about it. It's your employees are your internal clients, right? Let's just focus the same way. Sometimes you got to fire clients, it's the same concept. And so I think that's really building the culture and the vision, right? Being very intentional about where you're going, what you wanted to do, not just wearing it on your shirt or putting it on the wall. That to me is everything. And that's where I think some people might fall short, and they just want the values because, trust, honesty, integrity, blah, 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 because that's what everybody has. And it seems right. It's like the leadership. I just want a leadership team because it seems I can say I got a leadership team. To me, by actually doing it, something we learned with Simple Growth was actually it's the first time we've actually had them. And I'm wearing one of our shirts right now. It's got our core values on the back, but it's something that we talk about in every onboarding, every new hire, and at least once a week. And living and dying by those is important. And I have found, Mike, I'll say that a couple of these core values, and I actually want your opinion on this. I have 2 of them that I really maybe don't think should belong on there the more that we think about it. And I have 2 that I think should be added, right? So that's kind of one of those things. I'm wondering, is that okay? You know what I mean? Is that okay to do?
You got to get the team together and get the buy-in. So I think that's okay. But I think you hit on, I think, the differentiation. And I'm not saying it's just with Simple Growth of the masterminds, but Tommy Mello, you nailed it. One of the shop tours we went on. Jeff Dominic,
that was awesome.
Down in Cocoa Beach or Merritt Island, Florida. We were there at Bluebell, and I think their tenure of their employees is over 12 or 13 years out of 69 guys and girls. In the field staff, I think 63 of them have been there over 10 years.
That's crazy.
But they had gotten really clear on those core values. They might not have necessarily expressed it, but they were literally hiring, training, and eventually coaching up or coaching out to those core values, or technically firing to those core values. So I think that is the key that we've seen with a lot of the businesses where there's a huge shift on the labor market. And I think the other thing that we're seeing too is people get in, like Alec over at a couple of the other folks that are coaches are in the lower scale group, is they've really dialed in their onboarding process and how to acclimate the new hires. Because if you hire them and you pitch how great this company is, and the day 1 or day 2 they walk in and it's a complete shit show, you only have one chance to make that first impression. So I think it's really that first 20 to 30 days onboarding is what you've painted actually the truth, or is it a disaster? Are you sending them out in trailers that are unsafe and they shouldn't be on the road? So those are the things that I'm seeing. But I would agree with you. I think the market right now, the labor market's as strong as it's ever been if we have those core pieces in. The final question to wrap it up too, because this is the other biggest question that we're hearing a lot of people varying degrees is what's your thought on the consumer market? So you've got a really diverse base of services, maintenance, construction, landscape design. What are you seeing? What are you predicting in the future as far as your maintenance and then your construction? I know Jim Houston at the Landscape Summit last year, when we were hanging out with Mike Andy, said, hey, he's starting to see the pipeline of construction, design, build, not drying up, but slowing up right up through
Definitely
about
shrinking.
May to June. So right around when we were talking, like basically he was forecasting this or forecasting it. So what are your thoughts? Do you see that it's not drying up? Is it slowed down? Is it picked up? What are you seeing and what's your predictions?
Yeah, so and I'm no economist, but it's something that I have over the last couple of years. I've really started to pay a lot more attention to just global economy, because it does matter, right? It all trickles down. But um, in my opinion, and I'll start kind of with, and I don't mean this in any political ways, but for example, right? People, I heard on one of this podcasts I listened to, they were talking about how, for example, like the cost from 2019 to go and buy a meal at McDonald's has increased an average of 38% to right now. And think about it, 38%. Then you go to buy a thing of milk. Okay, 2019 to now, 38%. Like if that was the case, like but I know that wages are not to that level, right? And I don't think they can really afford to go to that level. So something's got to give. And I think that right now the labor market, that the shrinkage or that I'm seeing, and it's really just people holding their money a little closer to their pocket. But people are tired of getting screwed. They're tired of paying $8 for a jug of milk or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like, and it's tough, right? When you went to the grocery store and you spend $500, now you're spending 800, and it's just you start to realize that all that stuff adds up. Yet your income hasn't really made a huge impact or huge change. It's tough to spend some of those extra things. And then you throw in, like, for example, one of our biggest communities that we do a ton of work in, and there's a ton of money to be had out there is it's called Kissing Tree. It's a 55 and up retirement community, golf course, pickleball courts. I mean, everybody knows everybody. And we are in there. I mean, like, there's nobody's business. And but these are all people that some people have the money. They're just like, man, I don't care. This is what I want done. But then there's people that they're still living on a fixed income, retirement, whatever, regardless if that's $500,000 a year, they still are being mindful. They didn't get to that point by just throwing money away. They got to pay attention. And so that's why I'm seeing that they're not really feeling it. You know what I mean? That they're not jumping at the post to just say, hey, I want to do more landscape.
That extra discretionary luxury stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the kicker.
Be there, but the ancillary stuff.
Maintenance, to me, maintenance, I think for us is just we started to switch where we're going to focus more on the experience and focus on, like, hey, we only offer one package now. We used to offer, like, hey, you want biweekly, you want weekly, you want this, that, and the other. It's called our Green Flex program. It's 32 visits a year. That's it. And it's because, hey, you hired us because you trust us as the pro. You want your lawn to look good. This is what we're going to do. And honestly, it was the best decision we ever made, considering we got a ton of rain so far. We would have been screwed if we were on biweekly schedule still. But people are happy with the service. But landscaping, this is where, to me, and I know I told you at the beginning of this call, sorry, I'm a little bit long-winded, but it's like, to me, what I've seen is, and I've noticed in the last, 15 years of doing business, is like landscaping's typically, I mean, we're the last ones in, right? So we're the last ones to get paid. We're the ones that get our budgets cut and everything else. But I think that landscaping itself, we're the last ones to feel the issues. And I do feel that we're feeling the economic issues of landscaping personally, at least in my area, right? Because we're still growing. They're still building massive communities over here. They're still building, $750,000 homes. But my outlook on it, and this might be a little optimistic, I don't know. I have a feeling that we're near the bottom of what we're expecting in our area. And it's going to start working its way up because things have to change. And then obviously throw an election year in it. I mean, something's going to change whichever way it goes. But there's a little bit more certainty because once you elect somebody like that, that's it. What it is, for 4 years. So people can make moves and changes.
Good or bad, it's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but I think that's good for the sake of the market, that there's not this uncertainty, and there's been so much market uncertainty for so long that people are afraid to spend the money. But I think it's been good too, and this is the kind of last thing I'll leave you with on this piece is, like, I think the companies that manage their numbers, that hire good people and take care of their people and really understand the difference between just running a business and like running a true team, I think that's where they're going to see the flip. They're going to see, hey, we're going to power ahead. Because a lot of people over leveraged themselves during COVID. And I mean, I've seen big companies go bankrupt. I also seen, when the companies that didn't take care of their employees, they left for $30 an hour, to a company that didn't know their numbers. And in reality, that company, little did that employee know, that company is going to go out of business because they can't afford it, because they don't know their numbers. But right then, it didn't matter. They got more work than they can, deal with. But I think for us that have been really focusing and we want to better ourselves, and everybody in these groups, we're all here because we want to better ourselves, better our company. I think we're going to see the biggest return on that investment from the standpoint that we are wanting to essentially run the company the right way, right? And there's obviously always, everybody could argue the right, wrong way you could do things, but I think that that's where we're going to see that we're going to keep some of those employees. Our clients are going to see that, hey, we didn't do this all the way through this last 4 or 5 years. We're still here. We're still taking care of you. We're still focusing. We're still getting better. That's, I think, where we win. I think, ultimately, I personally think in the next year and a half, 2 years, the industry will be back to what it was in 2018. I think right now it's just
it's self-correcting right now. I think.
I agree. As it needs
to. You nailed it. There's the self-correction that money is kind of dwindled, and Garrett Matthews kind of nailed it a couple months ago. He's like, it's going to be the separation, just like you said. The companies that did it right, and the companies are living on their bank account and didn't really understand what they were doing, and they were living fat and happy, and they didn't have to. So
buying Lambos.
Yeah, really appreciate you coming on, Chad. I've seen a few of those. It's catching up to them. But really appreciate you joining us here. Going to be coming back next week, SG Weekly Talk Show with Marcus Mitchum, dropping some knowledge as well. Another guy in the Masterminds group and doing some really big things.
Smart dude.
Him and his wife Amber. So, yes, absolutely. I think he may have gotten some restraining orders from JP and a couple of the other guest speakers revoked. But bit of a fanboy. We'll touch on that next week. But Chad, appreciate it, brother, and we'll catch everybody next week.